Well, hello everyone. Welcome to our final show of this season of our show, Tawhid Spirituality of the Three Principles. And today we have a brilliant guest with us, Dr. Dicken. And today's topic is the spiritual psychological connection of the three principles. And what a topic! What a topic, and what a guest to have with us today to actually share and explore around this topic. I've been looking forward to this, especially because I love listening to Dr. Dicken. He's one of the the mentors that really had a huge impact on my journey, and I'm really grateful for having him with us today on our last show. And so for those of you, I think most of you know who Dicken is, but for those of you who doesn't know who Dicken is, he's the founder of Three Principles Mentoring and the co-author of the book Coming Home with Natasha Swerdorf. And the first time I met Dicken was in London. He was doing a one-day seminar, I think back in 2018. And it was such a wonderful experience for me. As I remember that day, it was Ramadan and I was fasting, and I had a little bit of sleep, but the experience overall was amazing because it wasn't even about that. I didn't even think about me being hungry, or I was just hanging out with people on the break and hanging out with Dicken, and it was such an amazing experience. And there I saw the purity of this beautiful man right there, embodying what the three principles is all about, and the message that Sydney Banks has blessed us with. And the second time I met Dicken was in 2019 in 3P UK conference, and it was such an amazing experience as well. And I got to hang out more with Dr. Dicken. So whenever I hang out with him, I'm just left with this beautiful feeling of love, and that I'm okay the way I am. And you just get it and see the beauty of these three principles. So really good to have you with us, Dicken, today.
Omar, that's very, very kind. Thank you. I've certainly enjoyed our time together.
Me too. Still have some beautiful videos together.
And a blessing.
So yeah, thank you. So I'll give it over to Harry to say a few words.
Yeah, so this is our final show of the season, and next year we're going to do a little different format of the show. But I thought I would document a little bit of through an example of how energy is shared spiritually in what Tahit started with. First of all, I noticed that I just for the first time looked at your conference that you're doing with 3P UK, and I noticed Omar's picture was a front and center on it, which set up something that I think that organization that you're part of the board is interested in, which is diversity. And within that, I had seen 2 years before 3P that it had a huge flaw in it, and that was the lack of diversity in it. And Omar mentioned, gee, I was the only brown face there, and so on, type of thing. But what happened was when you addressed it and opened your hearts to broadening your consciousness and sharing the three principles from a diversity perspective, Catherine, who I met with yesterday, we did a training at back to the FITRA, and she mentioned actually by you opening up was how Catherine and I met, because she talked and shared. That's how the energy is shared. Once you opened up, it wasn't only for you, it was for me too, type of thing. And I saw her and I listened to her and I says, I'm gonna get this lady I like. And then I said, we got to get her on our show and so on. And for her, she was running the organization that was one of the largest influences in 3P, but nobody was recognizing her or acknowledging her. And I came along and started to do that, see the great power that she was sharing, the wisdom and the help, which of course is the real bottom line. Are we helping people? Not are we getting more established, but are we actually helping people? And so she started coming on the show, and she was getting more verification. We were getting, of course, what we needed, Dicken, which was a Muslim influence. You know, it is a Muslim show on one level of the 3P community. And even though there aren't that many here, they listen after the show. And of course, as we talked about the time zones in Australia alone is just mind-boggling. So so we started to share, and then they had a problem in Gabor Mate, which is trauma-based teachings of addiction, had swept through Australia and the Muslim community had really taken to it. And so she asked me to come and talk to her back to the Fitra about that particular topic. We spent a wonderful afternoon together sharing. And eventually it led to something where this spiritual energy of the addiction conference led to, which she said, she was very glad to participate let us co-sponsor it and so on. And with Tawhid, it was a natural union for the two to come together. And with addiction, it was a natural thing because you're probably not aware, but we haven't done shows for 2 years, but we're averaging 5,000 downloads every 3 months. We've got well over 100,000 YouTube views and well over 5 million after show minutes viewed. So we're getting. Don't ask me who's listening. I can't answer, but they are there. And so that whole sharing of energy just created the conference. But the conference turned out to be secondary because all of a sudden the Muslim community is very underexposed to addiction. You're not supposed to be addicted, et cetera, but they're heavily addicted. You know, it's a problem, big problem in the thing. And so we started with the conference. And as I mentioned to you, it's been a little interesting to see that 18 countries are represented in registrations now. And I mentioned to you that Nigeria is at the top with Australia as the number of registrations. I've talked to a couple of ladies in Nigeria, but primarily. And then Catherine came up, let's do a department. And that's the real project. That's the real thing. And it's all come because Omar suggested we do this show. It's just started very slowly. We expanded, we shared, and it happened. And it's all part of the same thing. And there'll be a neat interaction between Tawhid and back to the Fitra. And it's a beautiful sharing. So that brings us back to our topic, which is the spiritual psychological connection of the 3 principles, part 2. Because Dicken came on last year, was very popular. And we created, if you remember, a YouTube on free will, a 7 or 8 minute excerpt from our talk, which has 700 or 800 or 900 views or something like that in our addiction thing. I'm trying to show everyone the interconnections of life. It's not all linear. When you talk about spiritual, it's the indigenous talk about the cyclical. It's more like a spherical type of experience. So my final little thing is, what did Sid talk about this? In the early days when Jim was around and I was around, he used to talk about the Eastern world and the Western world. And the Eastern world, he said, they see mastermind. And the Western world, they see ego mind. And then at some place, they come together and it's just mind type of thing. Dicken, in the Muslim world, it's mastermind. It's not psychological. Of course, they have to see the connection. They have to live as an ordinary human being with all our things that we create. But their perspective, and the reason I'm working with them is because of Mastermind. And so I'd like, as much as possible, for you to keep to that theme, because that's what the Muslim community really responds to, really understands. And it's not the Western world, it's the Eastern world. We're in a global conference coming up, and we're in a global change coming up in the world. And so having said that, and a few more words than probably intended, go ahead.
Thanks, Ari. It's always heartening to hear the power of sharing and how many people end up being touched. I know that it was always heartening for me to hear Sid Banks talk about how change happens. That it's a spiritual reality, so change happens differently than we tend to think. That if any of us have a shift in consciousness, we begin to bring more love and understanding into the world. It's powerful to witness that. I've been fortunate over the last 40 years to see people hearing about something beyond the intellect, that when you touch it, it transforms lives. And to be able to witness people having shifts in their consciousness and then having less and less tension, stress, upset, less ego involvement, less what about me, less thinking about oneself, and more kindness, caring, sharing, loving, understanding. So when that happens, for example, one person in a family has a shift in their understanding. Just being one person in the family being kinder brings more kindness into the family because it's an ecosystem. And it starts affecting that family system. One part of a system gets healthier, the whole system, it's interconnected, as Harry says. And as one part gets healthier, the whole system starts to get healthier, and it has an impact on people. When people get upset with you and you don't respond with upset and you listen and you respond with kindness, it makes a difference. It starts changing the dynamics within that family. So Sid would say that's one level that change happens. It's incremental. You have an impact on the people around you, your friends, your family. He says, but the change also happens on another level. Here we're going to go Eastern instead of Western. A shift in consciousness. Unbelievable. If we're all connected to an infinite field of consciousness, if there's a shift in one part of that field and it moves in a direction that literally brings more consciousness into the world, more love, more understanding, it affects the whole system, not just our family system, but the universal system. So, not to diminish the impact of this, but if someone on this side of the world has change, it can affect people all over the world and people on the other side of the world too. And then changes start happening. Possibilities, things that seemed impossible become possible. That's a huge part of what I learned from Sydney Banks. The impossible is just created by the human imagination. You go beyond human imagination to a dimension that's infinite, that's full of potential, full of possibility. Anything becomes possible. That's what allows changes to happen in situations where they think it would be impossible for that change to happen. So each one of us, by listening to what's being shared about these principles or what's true, about divine thought, about divine consciousness, about divine mind, anyone who listens to that begins to get a greater sense as they have insight into the unitary nature of life. And we start feeling closer and more intimate to whatever is around us. A lot of psychology for hundreds of years was based on the physical world and what was observable. So it would observe what could be observed. Behavior, you can see that. So let's talk about behavior. Feelings, people have feelings. Let's focus on how did you feel when that happened to you yesterday? Let's talk about that because we can focus on that. It's in the world of form. Right? Oh, you had a thought content that we can focus on your thought content. What were you thinking yesterday when you had that fight with your spouse? So we've got all the forms of therapy that have developed over hundreds of years focus either on thought content. Even Freud focused on memory, which is unconscious thought content. He thought that was depth psychology. It was just a misunderstanding. The existential humanistic fields of psychology focused on feelings. How are you feeling? What are you feeling? Get your feelings out, express your feelings, cathartic them. Right? The cognitive psychologist focused on thought content. The behaviorist focused on behavioral content. Just before we started talking, just for fun, I picked up one of Sid's books, the only one he wrote that was not a story, where he's using words to point towards something that is indescribable. It's beyond form. It unifies and is connected to form, but it's beyond form. So I just opened the book by chance. I said, I'll just be curious. I'm going to open it and read whatever I find. Listen to what I turn to. Here's our topic today, the connection between the spiritual and the psychological. I opened the book and I turned to, originally psychology examined the connection between mind and soul until that theory was abandoned. That was William James, the father of American psychology. He talked about consciousness and soul and its connection to human experience. And then it goes on. When psychologists stopped investigating the connection between mind and soul, they lost two of the most important clues to what they sought. Now it's just physical. Thought content, feeling content, behavior content, all of which has happened in the past. So the focus was on content in the past. What happened yesterday to you? How did you feel about that? What did you do about that? Becomes the content of therapy. That's why as a psychologist, I'd been a psychologist 10 years when I came across Sid. And when I started to get a glimpse of where he was pointing, I threw away everything I had learned and started over because I couldn't go back to my clients and ask them to focus on and think about and talk about the content of what happened yesterday or 5 years ago or 10 years ago and think that I was going to help them discover their innate well-being. Psychology wasn't even talking about innate well-being then. It wasn't, as psychologists, all the psychologists I talked to that were trained at my time never took a single course in well-being. It was all focusing on the content of what happens in people when things go wrong. So he goes on to say they focused instead on behavior, leading us away from our true psychological nature, ultimately encouraging us as passive victims in life. It deepened this misunderstanding that life happens outside in. The world makes you upset. The world makes you stressed. The world makes you feel good. If you want to feel good, you have to search the world to find something or somebody that will help you feel good. If you're feeling bad, let's examine the content of your experience and then figure out the cause of your upset, which is something that happened in your life years ago, often. Well, it was interesting that I turned to that. So he said, when psychology lost its interest in soul. Well, so let me talk about that a little bit. By the time I was 10 years into being a psychologist, I spent most of my time thinking about life. Now I see that innocently as getting lost in my conceptual mind, getting lost in my intellect, getting lost in my computer. Any human being who spends his day caught up in thought content, thinking about life, won't fall out of or beyond that thinking to the space where you're automatically going to begin to have feelings of well-being, new and fresh thinking, wisdom. It says the greatest danger with psychology being disconnected from its spiritual roots is that you throw wisdom out. That intelligence behind life, that when our minds are open and relaxed, that intelligence that then guides you toward what's best for the whole. It's not personal. I hope you, on a practical level, deal with anything that happens in your life because it'll move you toward what's best for the whole. I can just on a practical level, any one of us, when we're feeling tension and stress and upset, if we don't know that the answers lie in the spiritual dimension, we'll stay in the conceptual mind and keep thinking about what happened, trying to figure out what it means, what to do about it. We'll have dialogues in our head with people who will be thinking about what happened over and over again. So Sid Banks comes along, man with a 9th grade education who fell beyond the influence of his conceptual mind. He said for 4.5 seconds. And he experienced in those 4.5 seconds this spacious, infinite field of spiritual life energy that we're all intimately swimming in and connected to. And he said the feeling of love was the strongest, unimaginable feeling of the interconnectedness of all life, and the experience of that is love. And a deep knowing about what's true. And he came back from that experience convinced that every single human being on this planet, no exception, is connected to that same infinite, loving, wise, aware field of life energy. And that every single one of us already has what we're looking for. When I heard that from Sid, I started crying. I just couldn't stop crying. You already have well-being, Dicken. Stop searching for it. You're looking outside. You're trying to think your way to well-being with your computer. Your computer can never experience what lies beyond it. You'd say, go beyond all the words, all thinking, all concepts, just for a moment. Let go of everything you're thinking. Surrender. And tell me what you find. He says, if you can take one little step beyond your precious thought system and you touch that space, you'll find unimaginable beauty. Now, what does that mean on a practical level? Literally, Sid would say, don't take my word for this. Nobody take my word for this. I'm not trying to share with you a philosophy. I'm trying to point you within to a space within yourself that's beyond form, that's spiritual, that's soul. Pure consciousness is soul. What's pure consciousness? It's awareness free of the contamination of our conceptual mind. It's within everybody. When we stop searching and trying and analyzing and thinking, instantly we step into presence. It's not complicated, and it's not far away, and it's not like you have to wait for something. One of the most radical forms, one of the most radical teachings I heard from Sid was this space that when we touch, that transforms us, lifts our spirits and brings us new and fresh, brings us deeper feelings of well-being. This space, now listen to this, is one thought away. Listen, there wasn't a single person ever that I had heard say that before I met Sid Banks, and yet it rang true. And for a while, I got lost because I was trying to figure out what that thought was. Oh, it must be an insight. So now I'm going to sit here quietly and wait for the next half hour and see if I have an insight. That's ego's strategy. If you're waiting or trying, that's ego. You're in time. Sid says, step beyond your concepts. There is no time. Step before time. He used to say that. We go, Sid, we have no clue what you're talking about. He says, good. Stop thinking about it and it'll hit you. Because it's too simple for me to explain it to you. And it can't be explained. I'd spent my whole life searching and trying. So this was like the opposite of what I thought in order to work on myself and learn more things and figure out who I am and become gradually work on becoming better and better. And he says, what you're looking for, what you're searching for, what you're trying to get to, you already have, you already are.
You can explain the connection between the formless nature of what you're talking about and being inside, how you see that connection between those two worlds.
I'll use metaphors. I can only talk about
Well,
this.
it is a metaphor. Both those questions, those aspects are metaphors.
Yeah, even the words are metaphors.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure. Listen, you're in a room right now, I assume. And there's things in the room. But there's also space in the room. And then there's walls. And then there's an outdoors. If no one can damage the space in the room. And if the walls of this house fell down, I'd see that the space in the room and the space outside the room are the same space. So when the walls, all the boundaries that are set up by my ideas, I can't do this, I'm no good at this, I shouldn't, I have to, I need to, what's wrong with me, labels, judgments, all of that are limitations. And when our minds quiet down and we become more deeply present, those thoughts begin to melt, dissolve. They're just condensed energy going back into the field of energy. What's left? This spacious present. So Sid would say, step into this space that's beneath, beyond. It says not really within your body. That's just a metaphor, but it seems that way. You, like when you fall out of your head into this heart space. And then you touch that space, and that space is connected to the infinite energy of life, to the divine energy of life. So the energy of life awakens, new and exactly what we need in any moment, new and fresh thinking, feelings of, if you fall beyond the conflicts and the judgments of your mind, you experience peace of mind. Your mind becomes quieter and quieter, and you fall into this space of awareness, which comes before the senses, because we can be aware of anything in our senses. So you fall into this field of pure consciousness, awareness, free of the contamination of any concepts. Right? Presence.
Aliveness.
Aliveness, beautiful area. Aliveness is a word that's often used because the paradox is when we fall into awareness and we're not putting up a filter of negativity or limitation, our senses come alive, which is why all of us at times have loved being in nature, because we fall deeply into the present moment, and then all of a sudden it's like the smells and they become stronger and our sight. So here I am working with a woman who was clinically depressed for years, and she began to come to her senses, soul, waking up to this dimension of presence, free of all of her thinking that was weighing on her, becoming lighter in spirit, to be renewed in spirit. At one point, Sid called this being refreshed by your soul. Being refreshed, renewed. Any human being who falls out of thought into this space, we'll start feeling more peace of mind and then start feeling more enjoyment of the senses. The senses come alive, so aliveness has been used for the quality of that space. Even in horrific circumstance, you can feel that sense of aliveness. And then you'll notice that when we are in that soul space, in that quiet, in that, there's a feeling. They go hand in hand. Sid says when we step out of form into formless, from the known to the unknown, from the physical to the spiritual, that there are things that always are there, quiet or silence. So often Sid would say, look for silence beneath the noise of your babbling thought system. Look for silence. And if there's silence, if you're aware, there's a feeling, and they go hand in hand. What is that feeling? It's the feeling of being more closely connected to anything around you. So when I'm with my wife, if I'm all caught up in my thinking, I may not feel very close to her. I fall out of my thinking. I don't feel so restless and dissatisfied. I start experiencing contentment, which is how Sid often defined well-being as being content. You're not judging and analyzing and trying to label things. You're free of that. It's a freedom space, contentment. And then when I feel content and I'm with my wife, I start feeling my senses come alive. I feel more alive and awake, and then I feel more connected. Why is that? Because we're always connected. We just don't think we are at times. As soon as you start thinking, you're going to feel different and separate. That's what concepts do. They create difference and separate. That's why Sid sometimes talked about non-duality. You go beyond concepts. And he says, often the mistake is made then that truth is only the formless, when truth is all of it, because the formless dances in the form and it's all the same energy. So he says, time to start seeing in the singular. That's the unity between the psychological and the spiritual. We experience connection, unity, oneness. We feel more whole. There's loss of ego self and a gaining of what's called our true self. Here's another way of saying it, because sometimes Sid would like to connect this with science too. Some of the discoveries, like in quantum physics, I think I may even have mentioned this last time, Harry, because it hit me like a ton of bricks, because I heard it deeper than they were saying.
Can't remember, but I'll take your word for it.
Some of the top scientists in the world work at NASA, the North American Space Agency, and they've been dedicated their lives, many of them, to studying the energy in our universe. Not in the multi-universes, but in our universe. And their conclusion in a research study about a year ago was, if you take every single thing that has form that can be seen with any kind of instrumentation, so from the largest suns and planets and stars, all the planets, everything that has form, also including everything that can be seen with the most powerful subatomic microscopes. So the smallest particles in the universe, the electrons, neutrons, neutrinos. He said, you put the energy of all of that together. What percentage of the universe do you think that comprises? All the form, you put all the form together. 4%. That 96% of the energy in our universe is formless. They call it dark energy. dark matter. Can't be seen with any instrumentation.
That's great.
I started thinking ego is the mistaken notion that who I am is what I think and feel and behave. But that's only 4% of us. So it's only 4% of it. So Sid would say, go beyond the form of your experience. So he'd say, go beyond your thinking, go beyond your senses to this space, and you discover what's always here that doesn't come and go. Your true self, your soul. Awareness doesn't come and go. It's a misunderstanding that think awareness is within us. Now people who are studying awareness and consciousness say the infinite field of life energy is awareness. So anything created from that or out of that already has awareness built into it because it's made of awareness. So every cell in the universe has awareness. It's not in it, it's within the field of awareness.
The Muslim world defines Allah as infinite intelligence, which is very similar to what you have just defined.
And it is an infinite intelligence. It's full of a knowing. It's full of a knowing. So our true self is not the 96%. Our true self is 100%. Then you have the unity and connection between the 4% of our body is the universe. In the same way, a wave has form, but the wave is more than just this little wave. If you go within, there's water. You go deeper, you realize there's water everywhere. It's ocean, but it's all one. Our body is the universe. It's not a body. It's not limited. It's connected intimately to this infinite field of knowing, mind, awareness, consciousness, creative potential, thought. It's a characteristic of this dimension of life is that it's intelligent enough, wise enough to know how to create everything in the universe and operate it. It's a knowing, which is why human beings, when they're in a difficult situation, they don't say, think yourself into a panic. No one ever says that. They say, stay calm. That's like Sid saying, look for a quiet mind. Let go of everything you're thinking. If you need to have access to a greater knowing at any moment, go beyond thought into this now, into the true present before time, into this quiet presence. And there's a feeling and a knowing. And the knowing is not of the intellect. Sid insisted wisdom was a formless intelligence. Once it takes form, it's something else. Common sense, a new idea, right? But there's a knowing. So let's make it ordinary. When you drive a car, you can't be caught up in your thinking or you'll be having accidents. So you have to let go of thought to a certain degree and become to a certain degree present. And then without thinking about it, you're making life and death decisions. That's that intelligence. I watch flowers without thinking about it. They know when and where and how to turn toward the sun and follow it. I watch trees. There's wisdom is the intelligence. Everything is connected to this infinite field of intelligence, like Harry is talking about. And so you watch trees and they grow toward the light. They'll bend and turn and twist, and their branches will go in all different directions. I was out kayaking with my wife and we're going along the edge of an island. There's a tree and you can see how it had bent out so that it could get out from under the bigger trees above it. bent out to get the light, and the branches were going out in a totally sideways direction. And then we noticed one branch at the bottom, to have its best chance to get light, instead of going this way, it went straight down, just over the water, went way out over the water, and then it went up where it got the maximum amount of light for the good of the whole. We're being moved. We're being lived by that same intelligence. I used to think if I don't think about things, I won't make decisions. Now I know when I'm not thinking about things, decisions happen beautifully. They're not made by my personal mind ego, but they're made, they happen.
They're easier. They're a lot easier.
So much easier. When people say, oh, I'm struggling over a decision, I know they're looking for answers in their intellect, and you won't find wisdom in any computer, no matter how big or brilliant the computer is. People don't go to a computer for wisdom or for love or for understanding. They go for it because you can Google all kinds of cool information. Now that's helpful, that there's a role for that. I like being able to use my intellect to play with ideas and concepts and information, and to store and retrieve information and to process information. Very cool. It's a wonderful tool. If you fall out of your thinking, wisdom knows how to use your intellect wisely. If you try to do that, you're overriding wisdom. Let wisdom do the heavy lifting. He called that space inside. In the last talk that he gave publicly, last large talk at the school, he called it the ultimate answer. And I thought I'd get this out for you first, and then we can open it up, Harry. I took out the phrases in his talk that were pointing every human being on this planet toward this space within where the great discovery is made. Pure thought, pure consciousness, pure mind, divine thought, divine consciousness, divine mind. So he starts off, look within.
Always.
He said, all my teaching career, I've been saying, look within, there's a quiet, there's a feeling, and in that feeling, there's a knowing. It's so simple. And I've been telling people that for all these years, and everybody gets excited and nobody does it. So go beyond your thinking for a moment, just let it all go. Then he says, what you seek is your soul. See, we're back to soul. Pure consciousness. And then a metaphor that has really come alive for me and was the title of the book I wrote, go back home to your true self, not your ego, not the content of your 4%. Find a silent mind, a state of no thought. Look for silence. Step before time, space, and matter. Step before all concepts, because without concepts, there is no time. Without concepts, there is no concept of space. Without concepts, there is no matter. Step before time, space, and matter to pure, unadulterated consciousness. We often use pure and contaminated. Concepts contaminate. Go beyond concepts to pure thought. It's spiritual. It's
Always
energy.
was, always will be.
It's energy, formless energy that lies before creation. It's infinite. and it's one. Try and quiet your mind and just listen. Go beyond the intellect. Step inside and find wisdom. It's newness, a new world. It has to be found in silence and a nice feeling. At one point, one of my favorite quotes of Sizzy says, the state of no thought, right? We're not holding on to any thoughts. We may have, he explained to you, they may come and go, but you're not paying attention to them. You're just present without paying attention to a single idea or thought or concept. The state of no thought and the feeling of love are coupled together like lovers. He says, you always find truth in silence and a nice feeling. Wisdom is always found in a nice feeling. It has to be found in silence and a nice feeling. Look for the positive, not positive thinking. That when we fall out of positive and negative thinking, there's an unconditional positive. It's not ego made. Every human being is looking to find their way home. Your true self is God.
A very Muslim idea.
Well, truth is universal, so it's going to show up. It's going to show up as the core and essence of every religion. If you go deep enough beyond the beliefs and concepts and rituals and dogmas, you'll find truth. That's why Sid would say, no matter what your religion is, keep doing it. But as your understanding of this spiritual dimension of thought, consciousness, and mind deepens, it won't take anything away from you. It will enhance your religion.
That's what's happened with all the Muslim people who've taken to 3P. It's brought the purity of the religion alive for them in their own hearts.
Well, that happens in Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism, and I've witnessed it over and over again. It will bring alive what people have been saying with their intellect, but not connected to in their soul. It brings alive a lot of the spiritual teachings that have been around for centuries, because you're discovering the truth of that for yourself. It's powerful. Powerful. Working with a little 14-year-old teenager who has been suicidal. And she had a pretty dismal view of who she was. And in our talks, I witnessed her touch that space and be transformed before my eyes as you could see her suddenly have hope. You could see, as happened to me, as happened to countless people, when you touch this space, you realize what I've been looking for is it's already here. I don't have to go anywhere to get it. It's my very essence, my very core, my very nature. And the only thing in the way is when I get caught up in and start believing my thinking, then I suffer psychologically. The one cause, as Sid would say, the one cause of psychological suffering. Person gets caught up in their thinking, and then they start thinking it's true. He said if they didn't get caught up in their thinking, or if they didn't think it was true, they would never exhibit a sign of mental illness.
And if you don't think about it, it's not there.
Something else is that's nourishing, that's alive, that people use words to try and point toward, of soul, or look within, quiet down, be nourished, uplifted. Wisdom will lift your spirits and bring you new and fresh thinking that's helpful and useful to you. And it will guide you with a knowing that's not of the intellect. That's the beautiful promise that has been made by people all over the world in all centuries who have touched that space.
Well, maybe now we should open it up to questions, but one of the things, just a quick observation, I mentioned Mastermind and Ego Mind. It seems like you have joined that place where the two become one.
Yes.
And
Beautiful.
that's
beautiful, very beautiful, because otherwise you've created a duality, and ego is evil, rather than it's just a misunderstanding held together by a bunch of thoughts.
Exactly.
It's an illusion. It doesn't, in truth, it doesn't even exist. You let go of those thoughts. There is no ego.
Yeah.
And as the Buddhists say, no self, no problem.
Love it.
Okay. Shall we open it up? I'd like.
Yeah, let's throw it up. See if anyone.
Xenia.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
I want to say thank you, because something happens in me when you said fall into the heart. And all my babbling the last few days was dropped out, and I was very touching.
Mm.
I understand it on another level, what it means. And I just dropped down to my heart when you said it.
Yeah.
So thank you.
No, you're welcome. Yeah, when that shift happens, you don't even need to understand it in your intellect. It's like one of my favorite stories of Sid's was he'd say, if you're driving in the car listening to one of my talks and you drop into this space and feeling, take the talk out, roll your window down, throw it out the window, because you found what you're looking for and it never was on the tape. You just recognized something that's true, that you're connected to. But that can't even be he said maybe later on your intellect will catch up and be able to label it some way, but that's not even important. It's not essential. Well, I'm delighted for you, Xenia.
Thank you.
Shift.
And can I add, and it's the way to live, Xenia. It's an example to you that this is the way to experience it, the way Dicken said. It just happened. You don't have to think about it, but it is a fact, and it will continue. This type of living just teaches us less thinking, more intuitive, the way it works.
Thank you, Xenia. You know what, when you shared that, what comes to mind is when Dicken shared about this tree that lean on to catch the sun. And so our souls are eager for truth. And when you hear that, your souls go and want to listen more. And so you did that and see what's happened. Thank you for sharing that. It's beautiful.
You know what that makes me think is often, it used to be along in the 80s, they often would say, well, if you're with someone who's dying, be sure to remind them to go to the light. And what Sid says, you don't have to wait until you're dying physically to go to the light. Anytime, any moment. I was just talking with Michael Neal, and he was saying something he started to see is when he starts feeling heavy, as soon as he's aware that he's just holding thought, he lightens up. Go to the light, lighten up, become more enlightened, lighten your burden, put down your burden, which is always only found in thought. It's not the world burdening you. It's your holding of certain thoughts that creates the burden, no matter what the situation is. We just did a week-long webinar for 400 Russian-speaking people who are caught up in the war in the whole area, not just Ukraine, but the whole area. Many, many people suffering the consequences of war. And again, the great discovery is that even in that situation, there's nothing that prevents people from falling into this space of presence and then aliveness and then deeper feeling and deeper knowing. And it is what can help us find guidance through even the most horrific of circumstance. Family crises, any kind of
Religious crisis,
or a hurricane blows your house down, or some kind of ecological crisis, that nothing can hurt our soul. Can't be damaged, can't be hurt. It's spiritual. And so we go from the known to the unknown, from the physical to the spiritual, from form to formless. We're a thought away from letting go of our hold on concepts and falling into the heart, this spacious presence filled with silence and a feeling. Truth is always found in silence and a feeling. And in that feeling is the knowing that we need to deal with anything. Anything.
Beautiful. So, does anyone have anything to share or a question? Joe.
Yeah, hiya.
Hey, Joe.
Hiya. Yeah, thanks for the beautiful talk. And you just reminded me as well, like how just a couple of things that happened. Like when I was a teenager, I was just walking along the high street and a small child started running from the parent. And I didn't even know what was happening. And it was towards a busy road. And my hand just stuck itself out, like it was controlling itself.
Yeah.
And it's showing that. And it's also when driving along that I was stuck in my head and thinking, and then a truck started pulling into me. And it was just like, bang, straight into the present.
Yeah.
And it's that, isn't it? It naturally happens. And it just shows, because it's so easy to get caught in that, like, well, everybody else is the divine and that, but I'm somehow separate. That kind of, it's an arrogant view, really. But and what I was going to ask you to talk about was, even he said even the self and that is a thought, isn't it? And personality in that. But letting go of it is the thing that can bring us liberation. But it seems to be the thing that humanity fears the most. And it seems a strange paradox, really. The thing we fear is actually the thing that will bring us peace of mind and healing and liberation.
Well, fear of the unknown is really just a bunch of ideas that create fear. So it's very interesting with clients, because so many clients have a misunderstanding. People are afraid, if I let go of all of my thinking, I'll become a robot. I won't have feelings. I'll become passive. I'll be dead. I won't respond to things. I won't care what's happening in the world. I'll become soulless. And I said, well, why don't you find out if that's true? Let's find out. I find the opposite to be true. When I fall out of my thinking, I don't become dead. I feel more alive, more awake. My senses come alive. My feelings, I feel my feelings even stronger, and the quality of my feeling changes. So I have these beautiful nourishing feelings. And I'm better able, when people are fully present, they're better able to deal with anything, right? I'd work with business executives who have spent their life using their intellect, and they didn't know about the resources right under their nose. And they were terrified, if I let go of my intellect, I won't function. And then the one president of a company who said, oh my God, I've been a bird trying to use my intellect, one wing, the whole time, and I didn't even know I had another wing. And I was afraid if I let go of my thinking, I wouldn't fly. Well, the opposite happens. I discovered I had two wings, and now flying is so much easier. He became so intuitive and so alive and responsive, and his burden of stress lifted, and he began to use his intellect even more wisely, which blew him away. So people do have a lot of fears. I can't tell you how many clients are saying, yeah, but then I wouldn't deal with my kids. How could I be a parent if I wasn't thinking? I said, well, let's find out.
Thank you. And I think you're saying about the quantum physics and that, something I saw was they thought with dark matter, what they thought was empty space actually turned out to be a nervous system. And they're saying that actually all dark matter, and when they took a picture NASA of it, it closely matches the human nervous system of the brain. And
surprised me.
And also, if we're talking about diversity, I was watching them. They were saying in Germany that when they cut down the trees in the Black Forest, they just planted one species of tree, and they found that actually that species just started to die off, and they realized that you need a range of different species of trees for the forest to thrive.
I live in an area that's filled with beautiful, my wife and I love going for walks through the woods, and there's always Douglas fir, red cedar, different pines, large leaf maples, the diversity. It's just that the beautiful thing is, out of this singular being comes a diversity of forms, separate realities, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful when seen in the context of a shared being. So I can appreciate differences in people and celebrate differences once I experience this shared being. So Sid says, if you want to find diversity, the paradox is, first of all, look within. You're not avoiding the world. You're not denying the world. You're falling into the heart of the world, where you can sing and dance and celebrate this glorious diversity that we're a part of.
It's so much fun.
Yeah, it is a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
You know, a really spiritual question. Are you having fun?
That's a
Because I know if I'm in my thinking too much, I get very serious. That's a big problem.
You know, when you said this, Dicken, you reminded me of a guy who researches play. His name is Stewart something, I forgot his last name, but he mentioned that play is the amount of time you spend without purpose.
Yeah, playing without purpose, like little kids do.
Exactly, because when we don't really have purpose, we are just being present and fully engaged with what we do, and that fills our hearts with, you know, gratitude and all this nourishing feelings that are parts of us.
Purpose is an idea, a goal, an intention, a should. When we fall out of thought, the paradox is when we're not living with that kind of intellect-driven purpose, we become moved by wisdom's knowing, and a greater purpose arises, if you will. But it's purposeless, according to ego. And I mean, really simply, I just spent 4 days with my 2-year-old and 5-year-old grandkids. I wish I could show you some of the pictures of their faces playing. Sheer joy, just unconditional well-being, uncovered, and that sheer joy and well-being is within everybody. It just gets covered over because of the way we're involved in our thinking. So we have to connect the world of thought, feeling, behavior, content with the 96% of what's living and moving and creating that 4%, or we don't have a true psychology. Sid came along and said there is a true psychology, but it's not the one that is now currently being subscribed to. There's an evolution in psychology, so it's innocent that people have gotten lost and caught up. Oh, we have more people with their hands up, Harry. So
Yeah.
I'll stop talking. I just noticed.
Yeah, but that's really important what you're saying. It's the ultimate answer of the 3 principles as the pure psychology that has always been here. It's, I don't even know what that means, what I just said, but something like that.
Always.
Sid used to call it sometimes the psychology of the future. And it is actually the psychology of the future.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Well, Katharina, you have a question?
Hi.
Hi.
Hi, thank you. I'm going back to earlier in your talk, Dicken, and when you talked about, for example, with the family, when one person drops out of thought, how it spreads like a ripple effect. And I found the opposite in that as I have dropped out of my thinking, many people around me have been more desperate to hold on to their thinking. And
Yeah.
I wondered if you could speak to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Ego is ultimately fear. If we're not connected to the source of love and wisdom, we're not open to and avail ourselves to the source of love and wisdom, the world is a very scary place. So change itself is scary. And often when somebody changes, other people want them to go back to the way you were or the way things were. That's going to happen sometimes, for sure. It's still healthier.
It feels healthier
It's
to me, but not looking at them. I have this urge to
deeper
fix.
level, it's healthier. On a deeper level, it's even healthier for them. They just don't know it. If you have a body of polluted water and you clean up part of that body of water, it's a healthier system.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
good for you. I mean, it's not always easy when we first start changing, and like you don't get into arguments or you don't want to bring negativity into a discussion or situation. People don't understand that. It's not always the norm, but stay your course, because it's unbelievable what will happen, not just to you, but for other people at some point too.
And what they're experiencing may be very different than you're observing. What they're actually being affected by, the love that you're expressing, or the silence or the peace. On the outside, they often don't change their rhetoric, but they go home and think about it, and they're touched by it. And eventually they'll say, oh, Katrina's become a nicer person.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Harry. That's very, thank you, Katrina. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you, Katrina.
Thank you.
Dicken, I'm also aware of the time. Is this okay if we could take
There's Sue
Sue's
and
question
Lex
and
have a
James
question,
want to
so
yeah, is that okay with you?
yeah.
Great. So you go ahead, Sue.
Okay,
Yeah,
mine
your
is
hand.
also about family. As I'm changing and I'm going quiet and I am going into deep listening, it just happened yesterday. My sister was all in a frenzy all day, and she finally called me at the end of the day and wanted to pull me into her situation to fix it. And I just got quiet, and she finally said, "Are you still there?" on the phone. And I said, "Yeah, I'm just listening." And she said, well, give me an answer. And I said, you know what? You already have your answer. Where can you go right now to get quiet and let it flow in? And she said, I'm going to go water my plants. And I said, good, call me tomorrow. So I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I do have a lot of friends who are in chaos and frenzy. And you might speak to that quickly.
Well, being of service has nothing to do with the label on your door. Let me tell you that.
Absolutely.
Nothing at all.
Irrelevant.
Nothing at all. That it was your compassion for your sister, your presence, your suggesting what makes sense to you to see if it might make sense for her. And then it resonated as making sense. And it was helpful. It was a beautiful thing, as really being of service. That's the beautiful thing. When people begin to go beyond their ego, everybody is more compassionate and more in service to other people. It's not about me anymore in the same way. How can I help you? And then seeing, and then letting wisdom guide us toward what's helpful. I used to think I know what's helpful, and I was always wrong. So I finally had to have some humility and let that go. And then I was surprised often by things that occurred to me and didn't go by the book. So thanks, Sue. It's a great story, and I'm happy for both you and your sister.
Well, this seems like a good place here.
Harry, wait. We've got
we have James.
He's been waiting.
Jim.
Waiting patiently with his hand up for a long
James
time.
been waiting patiently.
Forget about it.
Excuse me.
I lost my window.
Okay.
No, you didn't. It's back.
I just want to comment, Dicken. It's been a beautiful session, a wonderful session, and I just love the feeling that you've generated in the room. It's so loving, such a loving space. I wanted to also comment, and you actually addressed it to another question on the idea of psychology, the psychological and spiritual nature and of the principles. And of course, there's a separation in that, in that phrasing. But as you were talking about psychology and the growth in psychology and the evolution of psychology, it's really, it's going inside and it's losing its intellectual emphasis. And when it's doing that, then we're talking about psychology and spirituality as being the same thing.
Yes, beautiful.
And the other thing I want to compliment is the emphasis on sharing about soul. Obviously, we all have souls. But what I seem to recognize overwhelmingly is so many of us have forgotten about it. Some even, you might say, are denying it. And certainly a lot are frightened about it. And this is, this is the nonsense that needs to go away, because this is the essence of who we are. And it's a beautiful, attractive, wonderful thing. So that's my commentary on things, but particularly the space in the room is one of love. And when we get to that space, and you brought us there today, that's a lesson in teaching.
Well, that's it. Well, thank you, Jim. That's very kind. And I've always appreciated your sensitivity to the feeling, because otherwise it's just intellectual. And even the root of the word psychology is psyche, and psyche is Latin for soul.
Yeah.
So psychology originally was the study of the soul.
Yeah.
And so to come full circle again, and more people are waking up and discovering a deeper dimension of being that's quiet within, and it's alive, and it's full of knowing. And the experience of that is connection, is love. And so without the feeling, we're just blowing smoke up here, aren't we? I mean, it's got to be the feeling, or we're not even looking in the right direction. So I really appreciate, you're the canary in the room for the feeling, let me tell you, Joe. Beautiful. Wow.
Beautiful. Well, we came to the end of this beautiful episode, and that was actually the last episode of the season. So I would love to end it with something that Mr. Banks said in the missing link, but all humans have the inner ability to synchronize their personal mind with their impersonal mind to bring harmony into their lives. And for me, that what we actually heard Dicken and Harry and all people here talk about. So I'd love to thank you all, and to thank our special guest, Dr. Dicken. That was amazing. And my co-host for an amazing season, and beautiful messages from all people who've been listening to every episode. We try to do our best to just share from the heart, and and just be ourselves. So yeah, thank you all, and we'll see you in September. So it's gonna be 3 months, and yeah, thank you, everyone. Love you all.
Thanks, Harry. Thanks, Omar. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and thanks everybody too, honestly, from my heart. This has been a enriching experience for me. The spiritual and the psychological expression from the Muslim sweetness that I've come to cherish. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.